welcome to another month of Vine Path. My name is Mariana. I am the wine buyer at Baco's Wine and Cheese, located in Boston, Massachusetts. And Vine Path is our wine club in which every month we explore the world of wine through various topics through the lens of 3 to 5 wines that I pick. This month we're exploring the grape Sangiovese. Sangiovese is one of the best known grapes in the world of wine, with its mecca being Italy. It's the most planted grape in the country of Italy, with 11% of its production being Sangiovese. And it's the 13th most planted grape in the world. It's grown all over Italy, but you see it more in Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, Puglia, but it's grown all over, even Sardinia. And outside of Italy, the top 3 countries that grow it are Australia, the US, and Argentina. It's a late ripening grape, so it needs a little more time to grow. It's really cool because it's kind of like Pinot Noir in the sense that it really influenced by the soil that it's grown in. It really takes on characteristics and what climate it's grown in, as we'll see with the wines that we're trying. I thought it would be key to start with the winery from Tuscany, specifically the Chianti region, since it's so synonymous with the grape Sangiovese. We're going to have 2 wines from the winery Lecci e Brocchi. This is a winery where the owners Sabrina Lestrucci and her husband Giancarlo and son Giovanni are making really expressive and classic wines from the grape Sangiovese. Sabrina's father, Vasco Lestrucci, started this winery in the 70s, and they would actually sell their wine to bigger houses. It wasn't until the early 2010s that Sabrina decided that her and her husband and son would start bottling their own wines. And though they make more traditional Chianti style, they also experiment, as you'll see. So we're starting off with the Chiorba Riserva from 2016. Il Chiorba is a nickname that they used to have for Sabrina's father, Vasco, who is, as you'll see, is on the label. And this is textbook classic Chianti. So the vines in this wine are grown in red gelastro soil, which is typical of this area of Chianti. It's also known as schistous clay, and like I said, Sangiovese really takes on the soil that it's grown in. So wines grown in gelastro take on this like powerful aromatic minerality, as I think we're smelling here. This is slightly cooler climate Sangiovese. Cooler in the sense that we're going to try other 2 wines that are from a warmer climate, and sure enough we're getting more sour red cherry, dried orange peel, an herbal component, but then a lot of rocks, slightly smoky. It definitely smells irony. The palate is so savory. Stewed tomatoes, leathery, meaty, mushroomy. I think 2016 right now is at a really good point where you're starting to get those more tertiary notes, again with the leathery, meaty notes, but it's still youthful and fresh. Because of the high acidity, it doesn't feel too heavy, but the tannins are definitely high. This is a 14% alcohol wine, so it's calling for a heartier meal. I would keep this classic and pair this with some meatballs in a tomato sauce. Pork beef meatball would be amazing. I was reading that this winery isn't trying to make monumental wines necessarily. They just want to make approachable, dependable, hearty wines that are still complex and elegant. This does just that. I think a really cool way to get to know a grape, especially when it's red, is to drink it as if it were a white, so no skin contact. And that's why I decided to include the Sangio. So this is the 2020 Sangio from Lecci e Brocchi, and this is the San Giovanni's project. In fact, there is a little booklet that comes with it with Giovanni's face and philosophy. Notice this wine says Indicazione Geografica Tipica, so IGT. That means that the only requirement for this wine is that all the grapes be from Tuscany, in this case from Chianti, but from Tuscany, so it's a broader classification, as opposed to Chianti Classico, that to be called Chianti Classico needs to abide by certain rules. It makes sense since making a white wine from Sangiovese is not traditional or typical, but drinking Sangiovese as a white, we're going to see more the stripped down purity of the fruit. And sure enough, this wine is wild. Marzipan, ginger, anise. It almost reminds me of like a Moscow mule. 70% of this wine was made in stainless steel, while 30% was made in new medium toasted barriques. So there is slight oak influence here. And I think that just really amps up the herbal quality of this wine. On the palate, there's a lot of lees characteristic, so that kind of yeastiness, a little reminiscent of some white burgundies. But overall, I think you can really tell that Sangiovese in its essence is just filled with spice. When you drink it as a red, you of course also get, at its core, it's very aromatic, very medicinal herbal. I would have this, I would go one of two ways. I would have a very fresh salad, maybe some fennel, pistachios, orange vinaigrette, or I would keep it simple with a sheep milk cheese. I think a sheepy cheese would pair really nicely with this spicy white. Up next, we've got Monte Cellars Sangiovese, the 2021 from River's Edge. We're big fans of Monterey at Bacco's. Patrick Cappiello has been in, and he's a very passionate man that started as a sommelier in New York City in Tribeca Grill and was wine director, owned a restaurant, and one day said he wanted to actually be the one making the wine. With the help of his friend Pax Mal, who makes fantastic wines himself, he went for it. The focus of Monte Cellars is that they use heritage varietals and vineyards in California, so varietals that historically were very classic in California, though you don't necessarily see that in the mainstream of the last 40 years. But remember, before Prohibition, California had so many types of grapes that immigrants brought that were moving west. I really like his labels. They have the Monterey Theater. The movie that it says it's now playing is the Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. So it's kind of an homage to old Hollywood and its history in this part of California. But the vineyards that he works with are from the Lodi, which is a little more inland, not very far from Sacramento. The Sangiovese in here is coming from River's Edge. The soils here are sandy loam soils. It usually gives more aromatic but lighter fruit. Patrick does carbonic maceration in this wine, so it's made similar to how they make Beaujolais. The fruit and those aromas really pop. And sure enough, you smell dark cherry. There's a light smokiness here, still herbal. I'm getting more like sage, but there's almost like a candied note, and that's because of the carbonic maceration. Only 300 bottles were produced of this wine, so very small production. The palate is a beautiful blend of candied red fruits. There's still a little savoriness and a little herbalness, but you can tell this Sangiovese comes more from a warmer climate than the Italian Sangiovese that we just had. So instead of that sour cherry, you get more like plum and dark cherry. There's almost like an orange hibiscus tea going on. It just feels fresh, but it still packs a punch. It's not a light wine. I would pair this with a loud, spicy dish, like a Moroccan tangine, something that's more spice in flavors, not necessarily heat. I think this would definitely stand up to it. I really love that Patrick is showing light to these historic older vineyard sites and different kinds of varietals. It's a side of Californian wine that I get really excited about. Up next, we've got the this Sangiovese from Tres Raices, a wine from central Mexico, from the state of Guanajuato, specifically a town called El Bajillo. As someone with Mexican heritage, I get really thrilled to see Mexico step its wine game up, because historically it's a country that has had vine plantings since the Spaniards arrived in the 1500s. They have a complicated relationship with wine. Culturally, I feel like Mexicans drink more agave spirits, beer, and if they drink wine, it tends to be imported. But I think the new generation is drinking more wine and realizing that they have land that does really well with growing vines, which some people are surprised to hear that because they think Mexico is so hot. Guanajuato is actually really high elevation, so it's actually not super hot like we imagine Cancun, for example, to be, which is all beach. These vineyards are almost 7,000 feet of elevation. And Tres Raices was started, their first vintage was 2016, a few years after they first planted their vines. The owner is Roberto Guerrero, and his winemaker is Aron Huertas. This is an area where there aren't as many rules as, for example, in Chianti, where they have to abide by a certain how much the wine is aged, where it's aged, and what varietal it can be. They're planting Tempranillo, Merlot, and in this case Sangiovese. The soil in this wine is also sandy loam, kind of just like the Monterey. And on the nose you're getting more cooked cherry, blueberry, dark plum. Again with the herbal. If Sangiovese is anything, it is an herbal grape. It smells more like mint. On the palate you're getting more stewed fruit. There's almost like a stewed fruit sweetness that, even though this wine is dry, you really get like prunes, dried cranberries. This wine feels more lush, and though the acidity is there, it doesn't feel as high acid as the other wines. But at the finish, you get a little more of that meaty, umami, leathery note. But just a really pleasant, more juicy Sangiovese with a really, really good structure. The weather here is a little more moderate with low humidity, which is really good for growing grapes. And in line with what grows together goes together, I would have this with some chicken enchiladas with the red sauce. I think it would be really fun. The kind of more dried fruit characteristics would go really nicely with the chili sauce. I really look forward to seeing more Mexican wine in the Massachusetts market. Thank you so much for joining us this month. I hope seeing the Sangiovese grape, where it's more famous, like in the Chianti region, seeing it, that classic expression, as well as a stripped down expression, having it white wine version of it, and then seeing it in two New World areas. It's a fun way to explore what this grape is about. I think it produces structured, powerful wines that are so food friendly and easy to share. So there's a reason this grape has lasted centuries. I definitely have a lot of respect for it, both the classic Italian styles and the modern New World styles. So thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, cheers everybody.